At my birthday party, I'd planned to announce my pregnancy to our friends. Instead, my boyfriend Jake handed me a beautifully wrapped box that held only a note. I'm leaving you. You're holding me back, and I deserve better. Your belongings will be packed by Monday. A few friends laughed, thinking it was a prank. But then Jake walked out the door, and all eyes turned to me. And me? I just smiled. Not because I was fine, I wasn't, but because I realised Jake had no clue what was coming next. He thought he held all the cards, that he'd executed the perfect breakup where he looked in control. He was so wrong. Jake didn't know I was pregnant. He didn't know I'd already found his secret credit card statements or seen the flirty texts from M. Station Tass on his smartwatch. Most importantly, he didn't know that I'm not the kind of woman who collapses under pressure. I'm the kind who gets strategic. So I kept smiling. I thanked everyone for coming, assured them I was okay, I wasn't, and even cut the cake as if nothing bad had happened. Our friend Megan slipped out almost immediately, claiming she felt sick. Interesting timing. The others stayed longer, helping me clean up and offering hugs, support, and even joking alibis if I needed them. Kidding. Mostly. By midnight, everyone was gone except Becca. She refused to leave my side and insisted on sleeping over on the couch. Once it was just us, I finally broke down. Everything I'd been bottling up came flooding out. The shock, the betrayal, the humiliation, and the secret I was carrying. I sobbed uncontrollably in her arms, and Becca just held me, letting me cry without any of the usual platitudes. Around 2 a.m, when I had cried myself dry, I told Becca I was pregnant. She wasn't even surprised. She said she suspected it from how I'd been acting. I showed her the evidence I'd found. Those secret credit card bills full of hotel and jewellery charges I never knew about, and the screenshots of text messages to M. We both knew M was likely Megan, especially given how fast she fled the party. We stayed up until dawn, talking through my options and making plans. Becca gently asked if I intended to tell Jake about the baby. I was firm. Yes, but only on my terms when I was ready. As for his cheating and financial lies, I didn't intend to stoop to his level with petty revenge, but I would make sure all his lies came to light eventually. At one point, Becca looked at me, half worried and half impressed, and joked that I can be scary when I get that determined glint in my eye. That actually made me laugh. A real laugh. Probably my first since opening that horrible note. When I finally crawled into bed, alone for the first time in years, I placed a hand on my still flat stomach and made 2 promises. 1, to my unborn child. I will provide a stable, loving home, no matter what. And 2, to myself. I will come out of this stronger than before. Jake thought his cruel little note was the end of our story. He was wrong. Monday morning arrived, along with reality. I called in sick to work, something I never do, and made a doctor's appointment to confirm the pregnancy. Around noon, Jake texted, "I'll be by at 7 tonight to get my things. Make sure you're not there." The audacity. I simply replied, "No." That evening, I didn't face him alone. By the time he arrived at 7, a few close friends were with me as support. Jake looked shocked to find a small, welcoming committee in our living room. Mark, who's built like a linebacker, calmly handed Jake a suitcase of his essentials and told him the rest of his stuff would be returned once he arranged a civilized pickup. Jake tried to act tough and complained this was ridiculous. I told him plainly he should be grateful I hadn't already changed the locks. He grabbed the suitcase and left in a huff, muttering something about me always needing an audience as he went. After he left, I cried again. Not for him, but for the future I'd imagined and now lost, and for the child who deserved better than a father who could be so cruel. First thing the next morning, I called a locksmith and changed the locks. Eventually, word of my pregnancy reached Jake. He barraged me with frantic texts demanding we talk, even threatening to come over. I told him firmly to back off until I was ready. A couple of nights later, just after midnight, he showed up at my door, drunk, pounding on the door and begging me to talk to him. Through the door, I refused to let him in and told him we'd speak the next day if he sobered up. He finally left after I agreed to meet him in the morning. At 10 a.m. the next morning, he met me at a cafe, looking miserable and contrite. He started with a litany of apologies for the birthday stunt, for cheating, for lying, trying to cover it all. I let him talk himself out. Then, I calmly asked what he actually wanted. He said he wanted to do right by our baby, and even mumbled something about maybe us getting back together. I shut that down with a small laugh and told him the only thing left between us was co-parenting our child. I laid out the conditions. I'd already consulted a lawyer about child support and custody, and he would need to be consistent and responsible if he wanted to be in our child's life. He looked overwhelmed, but had no choice except to agree. Over the next few weeks, I settled into a new routine. I focused on work and doctor visits, took my prenatal vitamins religiously, and kept a careful budget now that I was on my own. I wasn't just surviving, I was actively planning for a new future. Through friends, I heard that Jake and Megan's little fling wasn't going so great. They'd been seen arguing in public, and apparently Megan was unhappy with the prize she'd won. Jake had painted himself as far more successful and stable than he really was. Big surprise, right? About a month after that, I bumped into Megan of all people. It was at Target, and instead of avoiding me, she actually seemed relieved to see me. She immediately apologised for everything. She said Jake had given her the same story he'd apparently given others, that we were practically over and just living out the lease. She swore she'd never have gotten involved with him if she'd known the truth. She also revealed she found out he'd been seeing yet another woman while dating her, so she'd broken things off with him. I accepted her apology with a simple, "It's okay." Before we parted, she also mentioned that Jake had been let go from his job 2 weeks earlier and thought I should know, since it might affect child support. I thanked her for telling me and went home deep in thought. I wasn't thrilled that he'd lost his job. It complicated things, but I was glad to be aware of it. That evening, I was folding tiny baby onesies and listening to a podcast when my doorbell rang. I peeked through the peephole, I always check now, and saw Jake standing there, sober this time, but looking anxious and worn out. I opened the door just a crack. He started talking immediately, saying he'd heard I ran into Megan and demanding to know what she told me. He also awkwardly explained that he'd been fired, insisting it wasn't his fault. I told him I already knew about both. At that, he just crumpled, not with a burst of anger or tears, but with quiet defeat. He admitted that his life was falling apart. No job, no girlfriend, an apartment he could barely afford, and a baby on the way that he had no idea how to deal with. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of the old urge to comfort him, to say something to make it okay. But then I remembered those cold words on his note. "You're useless. I deserve better." And I hardened. Instead of comforting him, I calmly offered clarity. I told him he had two paths now: keep wallowing in self-pity and lose everything, or step up, take responsibility, and start rebuilding his life for our child's sake. For the first time, Jake truly listened. He nodded and quietly asked if we could continue talking inside. I allowed it, leaving the door ajar just in case. We sat at my kitchen table, and to my surprise, he asked thoughtful questions about the baby, real questions about my health, the baby's progress, plans for the birth. It was the first time he showed genuine interest in our child. In that moment, I realised I felt no romantic love for him anymore, but I did want him to be okay, for our baby's sake. Before he left that night, he promised to sign the child support agreement and to start looking for a new job immediately. He even thanked me for not hating him when he knew I probably should. I told him that hate takes too much energy. I have more important things to spend my energy on now. The next few weeks brought small but meaningful changes. Jake found a new job, lower paying, but at least it was work. He signed the child support papers without protest. He even enrolled in a basic parenting class at the community centre. As my due date approached, things between us were not friendly, but we were cooperating. We established a cautious co-parenting arrangement with clear boundaries and expectations. He would come to some of my doctor appointments if I invited him. He even helped assemble the crib when I needed an extra pair of hands with the bulky parts. When I went into labour, Jake even showed up at the hospital, carrying a giant teddy bear that barely fit through the door. It surprised everyone. He stayed through the entire labour. Becca was my primary support in the delivery room. When I felt like I couldn't do it, she kept me focused and reminded me that I was already doing it. Jake mostly hovered in the background, offering ice chips or a cool washcloth on my forehead. At least he was trying to help in his own way. When baby Ella finally arrived and they placed her on my chest, I felt a wave of pure clarity. Every bit of heartbreak and stress had led to this perfect little person, and I wouldn't trade her for anything. When Jake held her for the first time, he cried. Not a dramatic movie scene cry, but an ugly, sniffly, can't hold it in sob that left his face blotchy. It was the most genuine emotion I'd ever seen from him. The first weeks at home were a blur of sleepless nights and new baby chaos. My mum stayed with me for 2 weeks to help out, which was a blessing. Once we settled into a routine, Jake turned out to be more involved in Ella's life than I expected. He's not around all the time, of course, but he visits about 3 times a week on a set schedule. Sometimes he brings useful supplies like diapers or dinner. Other times he can't resist showing up with impractical but adorable baby gifts. Co-parenting is still evolving. He's missed a visit here and there because of work, and I've had to set some boundaries. But he's also shown genuine effort. Once, when I was struggling with a breastfeeding issue, he surprised me by researching a remedy and bringing over what I needed. Moments like that give me hope that we can be good co-parents for our daughter. Yesterday, I quietly celebrated my birthday. 1 year since that awful night. I had a few close friends over. Becca and her husband, Mark and Sam, my cousin, and others who have supported me. Even Jake dropped by briefly to give me a bracelet with Ella's birthstone before heading out again. I'm not the same person who stood there holding that breakup note a year ago. That woman was shattered. This woman is stronger. Sometimes, the worst thing that happens to you leads to something better. Not right away, and not easily, but eventually. That giant teddy bear Jake brought me at the hospital is currently being used as a barricade on my bed whenever I need to set Ella down for a minute. And yes, I kept that infamous breakup note. It's tucked in a memory box along with Ella's hospital bracelet, her first lock of hair, and other mementos. Someday, when she's old enough, I'll tell her the story of how she came into the world, not to burden her, but because it's part of her history.